Our panel that I'll ask to start to come up, our panel discussion this morning is looking at building an innovation economy. As you know, we're now a few years, it's 3 years since Industry Canada launched its consultation on building a digital economy, developing the digital economy strategy. Long overdue. Who knows if we'll ever see it? And so we thought, let's get together some really smart people and see if we can put together our own ideas, and maybe we'll send Industry Canada the transcript. They can just bind it and send it out. Want to thank SaskTel for its support of the Canadian Telecom Summit in sponsoring this panel. And our moderator for the panel is Namir Anani, who's the President and CEO of the Information and Communications Technology Council. He's the chief strategist and driving force in bringing ICTC's Centre of Expertise and Services to industry, education, and government. And he's trying to enable Canada's advancement as a leader in innovation and productivity in a global economy. Before joining the ICTC, a lot of us knew Namir when he led policy development and research at the CRTC. He's also held several executive leadership roles in the private and public sectors, Department of Canadian Heritage, CGI Consulting, Nortel, if you remember them, and Novartis. Namir has helped us assemble some really diverse and interesting perspectives on building an innovation economy. And let me turn things over now to Namir.
Thank you, Mark. Can you hear me? Thank you. It's certainly my pleasure to be here. Thank you for the introduction. Certainly my pleasure to be here today and to have the opportunity to dialogue with such a distinguished panel on a subject of interest to all of us, and that's the innovation economy. Simply put, how do you derive economic and social wealth out of ideas and knowledge? And why is it important to us? Because it is the essence of any high-performing economy, and specifically in a very competitive and global environment that we're facing nowadays. So I think it's fair to say that in the last number of years, we've been hearing that Canada is lagging somewhat on the innovation side compared to other peer countries. So, some would argue that innovation, just to contextualize it, is the product of adoption of technology. It's about the pipes, it's about the wireless, it's about how we as a society and businesses adopt technology. Others would say, well, it's the softer side, as we heard from IBM this morning. It is about the cultural aspect, the corporate culture of this environment. Some would say, well, again, it's about how we interface with the rest of the world. It's about our trade policies. It's about our economic policies going forward. Another dimension of it is certainly the talent. Are we starting the talent at the right place? Are we looking at cultivating that talent from schools upwards to entice the innovation factor? How we, upskilling the talent that in careers at the moment, since the technology pace is changing in leaps and bounds going forward. And many other factors, I'm sure, will be discussed today. So today is a rare opportunity for all of us to dialogue on this subject and have a better understanding of, and weave the picture and connect the dots of what makes an innovation economy in Canada. How this will play out, I will be introducing each panelist. Just a liner, there will be more information on the website to go through on that. I'll give them 3 to 5 minutes to have a better idea from their perspective. What do they see as the catalyst of an innovation economy from their point of view? After that will be questions and answers, and I will encourage the panelists as well to ask questions of each other, and then we'll open it to the floor. So in terms of the panelists, we've got Chris Hodgson, who is the sector lead from Google, Multi-Channel Solutions. Tracy Jennings, Canadian leader, Technology, Information, Communications, and Entertainment from PricewaterhouseCoopers. Warren Justin, the Senior Vice President and Chief Economist of Scotiabank. Ron Stiles, the President and CEO of SaskTel. Joan Vogelsang, President and CEO of Toon Boom Animation, and John Weigelt of National Technology Officer, Microsoft Canada. So with that, maybe I'll start with you, Chris. Give you the podium. I think you have slides. Maybe you can expand on
Sure.
On how do you see your perspective on what is an innovation economy from your point of view?
Yeah, I mean, I guess from my point of view, I spent 12 years abroad and recently moved back to Canada. And I think that's given me insight as to the Canadian market and when it comes to innovation. We heard Jean-Pierre Blais comment on innovation is essential in a fast-moving digital world. And Bloomberg recently released the results of their Global Innovation Index, and Canada came in 17th. With the GDP, we're ranked 11th. We're part of the G8. You would think ranking 17th, there's probably some potential for us to be doing a better job. We're probably punching below our weight when it comes to innovation. And I think that's incredibly important because innovation is directly linked to productivity growth and directly linked to quality of life and so forth. For me, I guess, you know, the Bloomberg study was based upon some very measurable metrics, like number of patents and graduates from certain degrees in university and so forth. But for me, innovation is more than that. It comes down to something that's slightly less measurable. And really, it's down to along the spectrum of sort of cultures which are risk averse on one end and cultures which are risk seeking on the other end. I think actually as you move towards a culture which is more risk seeking, you're far more likely to be an innovative culture. And I think we have to ask ourselves, where are we on that spectrum? I was fortunate recently to present alongside John Tory. He had a great quote, which is that Canadians don't play to win, Canadians play not to lose. And I think we can all, reflect on the last 10 minutes of the Leafs game and recognize that. We don't always do a good job of playing to win, and there is a fundamental difference when you're playing not to lose. In order to truly innovate, I think we have to play to win. I think we have to go from being on the defensive to being on the offensive. And for me, that's clearly a long-term solution to change the culture and to shift our culture to be more risk-seeking and to be more innovative. For me, it's fundamental, but there are some things we can do now in order to start that shift. And 5 things in particular. One, I think we can start with the next generation. It's going to take time, and we need to start with the next generation embedding innovative thinking into our education system. Secondly, I think we really need to value creativity and creative skills. Creativity allows you to dream big, and we don't do enough of that, and I'm happy to talk more about that. I think we need to value technical skills. I'm sure that's, most people in the room would agree with that. Technology is the platform for innovation. It used to be the platform for improving productivity. Now it's the platform for generating innovation. We need to celebrate successes better in Canada. I think we owe it all to all of ourselves to hold up innovation heroes on our shoulders and make people aware of the great things that they're accomplishing. And lastly, I think we need to welcome competition. I think competition, as scary as it is, will make us all better and will allow us to compete in a global stage, which increasingly we need to be doing.
Thank you, Chris. Tracy, maybe you can
Thanks a lot, Amir. So the perspective I'll bring is, can you hear me okay? Yeah. The perspective I'll bring is from PwC, working with technology, media, communication companies around the globe, both from our small emerging companies that need the access to capital, need the business model, have developed an innovative technology, to our larger global companies that need the size and critical mass, to be able to compete in a global environment. And from that perspective, when I look at the innovation economy, I think of business innovation really as a key engine growth. It's really important for our global competitiveness. It's important for productivity, like Chris mentioned, I fully agree. And the third piece, which is in our nationalist colors on the panel, we'll say it's important for our children and grandchildren to make sure we really have jobs and a sustainable opportunities for them in Canada. When we look at what's happened over the landscape with the emergence of technology, innovation, we kind of have a lens that looks to the customer and over on the one side. Over on the other side is really the content or product, and in the middle you have the distribution channels. So what we've seen with technology innovation is on the customer side, the globalization has provided a real avenue or opportunity for us to take our products around the globe. But it's also created significant competitiveness and new competitors that haven't been in our marketplace. So companies really need to shift and understand their consumers and get in front of the consumers to compete. On the opposite scale, you need the good content and good products, because in a digital economy, where there's no more bricks and mortars, the importance of having that great content as well as products is really key. If you're just in the middle, then we have said for a long time, and this plays particularly true in the media landscape, you have a significant risk of being disintermediated. So you're seeing companies shift to the customer side as well as really capitalizing the content. So when we look at the global environment and what we need to do in Canada, I wanted to cover a couple pieces. One is the importance for capital to take our emerging companies and really give them the tools that they need to get to the next level and be able to compete. And secondly, there's a significant area around the policy side, so some things the government needs to think about, in particular tax policy that really can enable, because I know we have a lot of private sectors, they'll cover the private side, but I would like to spend a bit of time really on the tax policy, what we need to do to ensure that our companies are better able to compete and we attract intellectual property and ownership and commercialization in Canada.
Excellent, thanks Tracy. Ron, maybe you can expand on.
So maybe I'll start with SaskTel is a regional telecom company. I'm sure people are aware of where we operate in Saskatchewan. Innovation is really our lifeblood as a smaller company in the scheme of telecoms across North America. Unless we innovate, unless we're able to get our cost structure down, unless we're able to offer new products and new services, we simply won't survive. With full competition, we have great competitors here in Canada. It's an ongoing challenge for us. So innovation has to be part of our culture, and it is. And again, as a very small company, we're proud of the fact that we've had some firsts. We were the first company in North America to use fiber optics, as a good example, a number of years ago. IPTV, we've had that in place now for much more than a decade. I think we're the second in North America to implement that particular type of technology. So it is part of the company, but it's more than that, I think, in the telecom sector. It's really about the fact that the wireless side, the wireline side to some extent as well, they're really enablers right now for innovation in Canada. There was a note earlier about technology being the platform upon which innovation is built, and I'm a great believer in that. A lot of the types of innovation that you're seeing come to the fore today really depend upon the ability to move data in large volumes, between different locations. The application of certain types of ideas, the ones that are going to cut our costs, they're going to make us more competitive here in Canada or in North America, are all ones, again, that simply require that you have a much broader reach, that you can bring together different pieces from different parts of Canada or from North America or from just an individual region. The idea of virtual networks is a relatively recent phenomenon, but it's one that I think is really gaining a lot of traction. And so universities is maybe a good example of that. They now put together virtual institutes. So it's not about bringing together the best in the world, to one location. It's now about how do you link them together, through the kind of networks that telecoms put together. So, it's both important to us in terms of our long-term survival, but it's also important, I think, from a market perspective. If you don't understand that you're there to help promote innovation, to help grow those kind of companies that are out there, you're probably not going to be successful from that perspective as well. Now, I think people always, when they think of innovation, they think about it just as the generation of a new idea. And again, that's a very, very important aspect of it, and we need to pay attention to basic research. But I think you have to think a little bit more broadly. It's the transformation of organizations, of companies, of our culture. And if you don't pay attention to the transformation process, I don't think you're going to be successful long term. The fusion of information, again, part of what the networks are there for. We have an ability in this day and age, from any location almost that you can sort of point to be able to get access to broad amounts of information. broad numbers of ideas, and Sandy was talking a little bit earlier about ideation. Well, ideation just isn't within a company, I don't believe, or it's not within a province, et cetera, but ideation now works on a worldwide basis. You can join a virtual network and you can look at ideas that come from China or India or Europe or any place you want. So that ability to diffuse, I think is again, the networks are now an enabler to allow to be more innovative. So we're really at a crossroads, I believe. There is an opportunity in Canada to jump ahead. I mean, we have the different pieces, the different aspects, I think, that are there, but it's about putting them together and actually accomplishing something. And it's very interesting in Canada right now. Almost every think tank you can look to is doing something around innovation. Conference Board of Canada that I sit on the board, this is a big issue for them. They look at it constantly, but other groups in Canada as well, ITAC for instance, okay, another group that's doing some work on innovation. So everybody recognizes it, but it's really about, again, putting together the right vehicles to make sure that you're able to generate that kind of productivity growth that we're going to need in the future.
Excellent, thanks, Ron. John, maybe?
Thanks, Namir. I get the opportunity to talk with business, governments, academics, and startups across the country. And it's, when I talk to them about innovation and what they think about innovation, there's a lot of different subjects, and to try to sum it up in 3 minutes is a challenge. But I took the top 3 things that are top of mind for those organizations. I think one is scope, second is skills, and the third one is support. And it's quite appropriate that Mark had mentioned earlier the consultations on the digital economy happened some 3 years ago. I talked to a number of groups around the consultations, and I asked this simple question. How many people were involved with those consultations? A little bit of interactivity. How many people, added their voice to those consultations here in the room? I have a few. Across the board, I see in supply chain logistics, I see in manufacturing, I see in retail the same type of thing, right? And the reason I think is because people don't understand the scope of the digital economy. And so I challenge everybody to reimagine that definition. It's not the digital economy. It's our economy reimagined digitally. I met an individual that runs a company up in Sudbury. They make robotic mining machines. They want to have the best mining machine that mines in Falconbridge. They want to mine in Chile. They want to mine in Africa, using Canadian know-how and expertise to extend our economy and project our knowledge and expertise around the world. I think the point's well taken around innovation as well. Sometimes we look at that shiny object as innovation. There's so much more to innovation than that shiny object. I like the Boston Consulting Group's definition of innovation. Those 5 key characteristics: new marketplaces, new customers, growing a customer base, efficiencies, gaining productivity. Maybe we can close that productivity gap. I think the second one is skills, recognizing that skills and the people are important. From the time that people have their first experience with technology and using technology to do cool things, technology-enabled lawyers, technology-enabled teachers, technology-enabled farmers. We need to bring up those skills so that people can take the technology, take their trade, their occupation, their love, their passion further, and then be able to, again, project that know-how and knowledge around the world. There's a people aspect to that. I talked with the school board in British Columbia, and they're building the school to last for 50 years. That school is still continuing to be a place in the community, that agora of ideas, that place where you have those chance collisions of great ideas coming together. So let's not forget the people side. When I talk to entrepreneurs, they want the support. They want mentors. They want people to ask them those challenging questions so that they can arrive upon the conclusion themselves. They want to have access to those people to have those conversations. They want to have that visibility as well so that they can take their local innovation, that excellence that they've created here, and project that around the world. We work closely with over 1,300 entrepreneurs, new startups across the country, to help them get their feet under them, build out new products, and then we take the cream of the crop through our BizSpark One program and introduce those to venture capitalists around the world. We have co-working locations where we're there in person. We show up so that late at night people can say, hey, what do you think about this, to help them? So that support is important across the board. And so as we start to look at this evolving innovation economy, we have to remember that, look, let's properly scope this because it affects our whole economy. Let's make sure we build those skills across all those areas, not just STEM. Let's add that A. It's STEAM. This is the steam that's going to drive the engine. And let's provide that support, that in-person interaction to help people move along.
Great, thanks, John. Joan?
Thank you.
Just back from Africa, I really.
Yes, I came back from Namibia actually last night. I'd like to take just a few minutes to explain to you what we do at Toon Boom, because I would imagine we're the least recognizable company sitting on this panel, since all the others are fairly big players. So we are a medium-sized company. We're a software engineering firm that designs technology specifically for animated productions or animated content. We're actually net exporters. Less than 5% of our business we do in Canada, and we operate and support studios in 123 countries around the world. Our technology was originally designed to automate the way that Disney did their feature films and television productions, and at that time they were outsourcing primarily to China, Taiwan, Korea, and the Philippines. Disney is still our largest customer, and we are in probably over 80% of the major studios around the world. We were fortunate to win our second Emmy last year, and we've won the HSBC Export Award, the Frost & Sullivan Quality Awards, etc. So clearly, we are an innovative company. In fact, all of the technologies in this sector were designed and developed in Canada, and we are the last Canadian-owned. And as we were looking for financing a number of years ago, it was absolutely impossible to find in Canada. We were fortunate a year ago to actually become a part of the Chorus group of companies. But if you were looking to get 20 or 25 million in Canada to take your company to the next level, it's absolutely an impossible task. What we did do after working with the major studios was we were quite concerned about the level of education with youngsters, particularly in the United States, as we're all backing the United States to remain a strong leader in the world. And we designed technology that was applicable to children as young as 5 and up that could map onto their regular curriculum. And this is why I just came back from Namibia, because we were fortunate to present at the United Nations e-learning event in Africa, because this technology now with African American boys, Hispanic youth, hundreds of thousands of children in India has proven that their marks in fact increase by 20% in all subjects if they are able to be creative with the answers to their subject versus having to be doing things by rote. The other thing that's very interesting is that you can go into Africa and India and put a computer or a tablet in front of a child in a village, and within about half an hour, they've figured out how to use it. And so what we do know is that the youngsters today, the left and right side of their brain is very highly developed. We believe that Canada can be a powerhouse. I think that we have a lot of creative and innovative people. There are wonderful incubator companies. The problem that we have as innovators is getting the support from within Canada itself to make our companies head offices and buy companies around the world. We are too fast to sell out, and as a result of that, we don't in fact create the high-paying decision-making jobs that by all rights, with the creativity that we have here, should be able to stay within Canada.
Excellent, thank you. Very good. Excellent. Warren?
I'll take a little bit of different tack as an economist and look at innovation as the imperative to sustaining our standard of living and prosperity over the next 5 to 10 years. Because businesses tend to focus on quarterly results, economists tend to focus on cycles. You know, we're in a disappointing recovery, or you'll see stories about the risk of recession and stuff like that. We've got to start paying attention to the long game here. And the long game is pretty clear. If you go back to the beginning of the 1990s, the so-called G7, Canada, major European countries, US and Japan, accounted for over 50% of global economic activity. Now that's down to a third, and the emerging world is slightly over half, according to some measures. And by the year 2020, you're going to find, given that the emerging world is growing at 2 to 3 times what we're seeing in the so-called familiar world, that dominance will continue. We've had a paradigm shift. If you went back a decade, you would have seen China as a low-cost supplier of a lot of things that we consume. Increasingly, it is the market. The emerging world is the market. China alone dominates the commodity space, is the largest producer of autos in the world, plans to expand its production by 50% over the next 5 years, and supplies more tourist dollars to the world than any other country, has just passed the US and Germany. So we need to take that paradigm shift into account and see how it's going to impact our economy. Turning it more to what it means for individual businesses, increasingly over time, we're going to find that it's small and medium-sized businesses that are the key to prosperity. Long production runs simply aren't going to drive our economy. If you look at the auto sector in Ontario, where the value added is being put is not more steel, is not more rubber in the cars, it is technology, it is safety products and the like. In fact, the value added in that particular area has doubled over the last 5 years. And if you're looking at companies, the tendency for the companies to succeed as opposed to perhaps be left behind, it is those that are adopting new strategies that are less US and Eurocentric, that are resilient and adaptable, that are focusing on value-added niche products, that are in a collaborative type of business structure. These are the things that are going to succeed over time. If you're looking at government, there has been a tendency for our governments to pick winners and losers. I've been doing economic forecasting for 4 decades now, and I know I can't pick winners and losers, and certainly governments have not been too successful in that particular way. You set the overall structure to succeed with respect to taxes and incentives. You do not favor one sector versus another. And I think this is a lesson that's very, very important based on experience that we have seen in the past. If you're looking at the educational system, and that's one of the ones that I feel very strongly about, we need not to change it, but to entirely restructure it. Starting with early childhood education all the way up through the primary, secondary grades and university and community college network. Because we will see some companies in this country succeed very, very well. But the way that we are going to sustain prosperity and avoid a substantial widening of income disparities in this country is to bring all people along in this technology and innovation and venture. If we do not, then as a country, I think we have big challenges.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Warren. I think we're seeing a dimension from culture, from software aspects, to talent, to some of the policies that we need. Tracy, let me point to you in terms of, you expanded on, you talked about that we need some taxation policy, and the question, do we have the right policy tools in Canada? And we hear of things happening in other countries, for instance in the UK, in terms of patent box for rewarding companies with IP potential. Can you expand on what do you see should take place in Canada to get the innovation sort of cycle happening?
Yeah, and I totally agree with both Joan and Warren's comments. When you look at the policy side, and we talked a lot about the government side and capital, but if you look at what we need to do in a policy matters, you've got to create an environment that allows the right incentives. So I would say in Canada, we do have research and development incentives that do spur activity. And those are at the front end of technological development. We've also invested significantly in terms of the university academics, and I think we're well renowned around the world in terms of our ability to enhance technology there. But what we're talking about other countries doing is they are in leaps and bounds kind of getting ahead of Canada. Why? Because they're focused on the pull type incentives that are at the commercialization stage. So what are these types of incentives? They're incentives of not just taking your intellectual property and truly trying to retain the jobs around intellectual property and allow companies to then expand and grow around the world without being, having a deterrent, or encouraging them, better said, to retain that intellectual property, in Canada, because that really has jobs. And in a global environment, where companies can take digital products and you're competing now with countries around the world. So Luxembourg was the first country. So they developed a patent box, and it's a box that really exempts certain types of income from patents. And what it allows organizations to do is to really grow and get that revenue from the product around the world without paying, tax in the home jurisdiction. You've seen Spain, France, Luxembourg, Hungary. But more importantly, I think we should take a look at what the UK has done. If I look at over the last few years at points in time when our Canadian government hasn't really invested in the tax policy we needed for commercialization, the UK has. They've revamped their corporate regime. And what they've done is exempt, income from foreign companies when it comes back to the UK, establishing it as a great place to really springboard into Europe investment. They have added incentives and ensured that the companies can use the UK by getting interest deductibility, you know, to offset some of the costs of investment. And more recently, they have also developed a patent box. I want to come back to the last 2 points, because in the 2012 budget, you know, Canada went the opposite way. Because if you look at those 3 things that the UK has done, the exemption system for foreign affiliates, we already have that in Canada. We have a phenomenal foreign affiliate regime, which basically says if you go out and you earn business income, you know, in different countries, you can repatriate that profits back and you will not have additional tax in Canada. That's a fundamentally important thing in terms of business development. So the UK now has that. Our Canadian government over the last few years reduced our corporate tax rates to 26%. The UK is now at 21%. The third piece is around that interest deductibility, where Canada in their budget made some shifts which really gave the perception that we were closing our doors to Canada as a springboard and a holding company. The government was trying to close some loopholes, but you know, some would view it as you know, hitting it with a sledgehammer that created some perceptions. And then the final piece is around the incentives. So if you think about it, I know the government's very concerned about making sure we're neutral from an economic standpoint. But from the work that PwC has done also, individuals at PwC on the policy side, it is not a stretch to introduce measures that exempt certain types of foreign income, in particular in technology sectors where we really need to grow and commercialize in a way that's actually revenue neutral for the government. So it's not going to cost anything. And why? Because if you took that intellectual property and you put it in you know, Luxembourg or another jurisdiction, then you would bring the money back to Canada and you wouldn't pay any tax. So from a revenue neutrality point of view, it is something that is definitely worth considering when other countries are putting it at the forefront and trying to develop their strategy of what to do to ensure they're competitive in the global environment. I think it's time for Canada to look at how we can actually, you know, help support our companies in kind of their ability to, you know, move and expand globally.
Great, thanks, Tracy. So, Chris, you talked about the culture of an organization. I know, you know, we see a lot of innovations coming out of Google as much as other companies. Maybe you can sort of expand on what makes that culture happen and how does it work?
Yeah, it is a very unique culture as a company. I'm not going to try to take any credit for it whatsoever because I just joined a couple of years ago. But after having my own business, setting one up and running it, and then coming into Google, I've been exposed to the uniqueness that is Google. And you do learn a lot about how we structure our organization and how we operate as a business in order to try to maintain, as best we can, innovation within the company, because in the space in which we operate, obviously things change very quickly, and we've seen from Nortel and BlackBerry and so forth that you need to constantly innovate or else you can fall behind easily. And one of the interesting things about it is it's actually not radically dissimilar to the Canadian environment, in many ways, actually. But there are some big differences. And the biggest one I alluded to earlier, was this concept of dreaming big. We really have an attitude that permeates the entire organization from our leadership down, that we can really change the world, and we need to think much bigger about what we can accomplish. And I know that sounds sort of nice and fluffy and great, everyone's supposed to dream big, but we really embed that down to the practicalities of how we work as well. So everything from giving our engineers a day a week to work on something which is actually specifically not part of their job is a very, many would say that seems kind of odd, why would you do that? But a lot of our creativity and a lot of our products have actually come out of that 20% of their time that they're doing something that's not part of their job. Not only that, it helps them get better at their job because it allows their mind to go off and go from the right side of their mind perhaps to the left side or vice versa. So it allows them to think about something differently which may impact their job. Second to that, if I look at something we do on a regular basis is every quarter the divisions set 2 or 3 goals that they're going to hit for that quarter. And they share it with everyone, which I'll talk about in a minute. But what's interesting about that is at the end of the quarter, they actually score themselves, and then they present back to everyone how they did. And it surprised me the first time I saw the presentation, because we actually achieved 75% of the overall goals as a company. And our CEO, Larry, was disappointed. And he was disappointed not because we hadn't achieved 100%, he was disappointed because we had achieved too much. He shoots for 70% as a target, and if we get over 70%, his feedback is we haven't set audacious enough goals. We need to be setting ourselves more aggressive goals and more audacious tasks that we can accomplish and things we can deliver. And that to me just speaks volumes as to what we're trying to do as a business. And it permeates down to the culture of the organization. There are many other things other than dreaming big. One of them is just how we value creativity. So in a culture which is predominantly engineers and technology, if you go to our Mountain View campus, it's probably one of the most creative places I've ever been. It's like Walt Disney World. There's just crazy creative stuff going around. We've got pink flamingos on the lawn. We've got beach volleyball. We've got ways that people can escape from the rigidity of their work and actually let their mind shift off into somewhere else, and it allows them to come back fresh to a challenge or to a problem. Overall, as a business, we fundamentally believe that we're, as a society, we're only really tackling about 1% of the global challenges that are out there. And there are an enormous number of challenges that we could be going after. And we talk internally about this, the problem many companies have of a zero-sum game. And you know, where 2 companies are battling it out, and you're both fighting over a fixed piece of pie. And really, if we're only tackling 1% of the world's problems and the world's opportunities, then actually we'd be far more productive if rather than fighting over the biggest piece of pie, we actually, you know, figured out there's a bigger piece out there. Let's create another pie. And there is so much more opportunity that a zero-sum game just leads into negativity and a lack of growth and a lack of innovation. And we need to avoid that approach to things and think more about the opportunities that are available to us and how to tackle those big opportunities.
Excellent. Thanks, Chris. So, John, maybe, you know, we as an organization, ICTC, we've done a couple of research in the last couple of months, in fact, on the mobile ecosystem that we call it, the cloud, the apps, and the mobile arena. And we concentrated on the apps initially, where we, you know, it was a surprise to me as well to see that it's an economy that is employing approximately 50,000 in Canada, going to 80,000 by 2016, generating $2.2 billion to the economy going forward. All of that is going to have an impact on the e-health sector, on the health sector, on the banking sector, on the manufacturing, and on everything. So in terms of the talent development, are we concentrating, are we developing our talent to meet the emerging sectors of the future? Or are we still in the traditional development of talent? How does Microsoft see that? I know it's a tough question.
All right, leave the tough one to me, right? So I think we see a kind of a growing chasm in between for the skills that are there. Canada has world-class skills that they're taking around the world. A lot of small startups that are taking their innovations and projecting that knowledge around the world. And so we heard earlier today around, you know, having broader markets externally outside of Canada and being able to reach and punch above our weights for that environment. We're seeing a fundamental shift, however, in the way that business is being done. So, you know, I've been spending a lot of time on the road talking to people about cloud computing and how cloud computing is transforming the world of information technology. But it's not just transforming the world of information technology, it's transforming our business as well. And so if you think of cloud computing in the early stages as it is today, as the early stages of electricity, you know, think of Tesla and Edison talking about the use of electricity in those eras when they were around. What were they using electricity for? Street lighting. Now, if we think a little bit further around the innovations that have come because of electricity, something as simple as refrigeration. You know, where would we be without refrigeration? You know, medical imagery and all those types of tools. So it's the application of the technology to tough business problems. And that's where we get to that conversation around, are we training enough doctors to understand how technology can help them? Are we training enough lawyers so that they understand technology, how it can help them with their activities? Really had a light come on when I was talking to a large construction firm out in Calgary, and they challenged me. They said, you know what, what's in that white ACO trailer outside a construction site? And I kind of scratched my head and, you know, go through that thought exercise yourself. You think there's a lunchroom table in there, a water fountain, and perhaps a coffee machine. But there's a server in those rooms. And that server is there for the electricians and the plumbers so that they can take a look at the pipes to make sure that there's sewage or wiring that goes through that particular piece of pipe. And so technology goes throughout all our businesses. And you know, I'm an engineer, I'm a computer engineer, and I always want to put technology in the right place, in the right time, in the right way. But I don't get the business of everybody. I don't understand what a doctor needs to do. I don't understand the rhythm of the business for a teacher. And so we need to have those people understand the power of technology and then meld those two together. You know, I work with ICTC around some of those competency profiles, and we just recently did one around health IT. And Namir knows that I was a big vocal advocate for saying, well, how do we get the healthcare practitioner involved with this? How do we take that competency and put it into everything that we do and bring it across the board? And so, you know, we still continue to need to focus on STEM skills, but again, let's include that A and the rest of the alphabet. So it's STEAM, let's get those arts, the creative people in there, and let's get those people that have other passions that can see how that technology supports their passions. The mobile environment is just one place where these things show up. You know, I joke with my friends, in 3 years, the mobile will be silent. It'll just be computing, right? We're not going to distinguish between the two of them. Why? We've got white space radios that are coming out with great access. We're going to have the next generation of broadband that our telcos that you are going to provide. So it's just going to be computing. So how do we take that computing across multiple screens and then help people be gainful in the environment?
Thanks, John. Ron, you talked about you know, the infrastructure and so forth, and I'm sure the mobile arena is on the mind of Saskatoon in terms of thinking going forward. What's your vision of this environment? What do you think? I mean, we hear that mobile is becoming part of the fabric of the productivity in Canada, and it's you know, it's impacting GDP going forward. Do you think we have enough spectrum in Canada? Do we? Where do you think the future is in mobile in that arena?
Well, I personally think that there is enough spectrum. There will be enough spectrum in the future. So I know there's a lot of concern right now, given data growth and how we're utilizing the spectrum, that we're going to run into a shortfall, and there's a lot of discussion, especially in the United States, about it. But I'm a great believer that with the way technology keeps changing and improvements, efficiency, effectiveness, that you're going to see the amount of spectrum not being the issue. I think the deployment and use of the spectrum is going to be the issue. And what I mean by that is, if you look at deployed spectrum today, as a percentage of potentially all the spectrum available in Canada, I would guess that you're probably talking maybe 50–60% of it is actually fully deployed. You know, it's not in use. Now, people say, well, how can that be? Well, if you move outside major urban centers, okay, most companies don't use the spectrum. They don't deploy it into rural areas where there's mining and agriculture and these kind of industries that are out there. So you need to have a strategy, I believe, or the federal government should have a strategy about pushing deployment a lot harder. You know, in our particular jurisdiction, a couple of the other providers is a good example, okay, have owned spectrum in certain parts of the province for 25 years and have never deployed it. You know, it sits idle, it does. Now this is going to become more and more important over time, because if you're talking 700 megahertz, which is the next big spectrum auction, there really isn't a deployment requirement. Now when you look in there, it talks about you need to deploy it according to your present HSPA footprint. But look, if your footprint is just Regina and Saskatoon and Saskatchewan, okay, you're not taking it out to any of the other jurisdictions that are in that province. So my belief is that the issue in the future is going to be about deployment. You've got to force deployment out to more areas, okay? It's an enabler for all those industries. We always think about it in the context of our own personal use and how important it is for us, but it's important for all those industries that are out there, and those industries are not in urban areas. Those industries are in non-urban areas. So deployment is going to be very important. You're going to have to create the infrastructure, okay, if you really want people to be innovative, you want those companies to employ it. A good example for us in our jurisdiction, okay, was northern Saskatchewan, where a lot of our mines are. For uranium is a good example, or gold mining, zinc, copper, any of these areas. And for them, their big problem isn't that they don't have ideas about how to be more innovative, but it's they don't have the connectivity. And so we've now put together some arrangements with a couple of the companies. We'll deploy fiber into the area that will enable mobile, for instance, at a lot of the different sites. And again, that gives them an opportunity to do things they couldn't do in the past. I want to just address a couple of comments that have been here already, okay, by other panelists, and not to want to be too controversial, but you know, we're talking a little bit about tax regimes and fiscal policy and those kind of things. And you know, I think those are very important, and you have to set the framework for companies, okay, and give them the right incentives. But you know, generally, if you do the comparisons of what Canada has versus other jurisdictions, the United States, et cetera, we're pretty competitive when it comes to tax rates, okay? If you look at meters or marginal tax rates, they're not bad in Canada. We can always do better, and we can always put new ideas, new vehicles in. But I personally think that, you know, Joan, some of your comments I think are bang on, okay? It's more about culture. Our entrepreneurs, as they build companies and they get them to a certain point, they seem to want to sell them, or they seem not to be able to find the capital, so they have to sell them to somebody. And I think, again, there's this culture of trying to cultivate small companies and allow them to grow and to become major world players that is really at the heart of a lot of the problems we're facing today. There are great small companies across Canada, and we need to do a lot more to support them. And that's where I think you got to place the emphasis, is more on that culture around supporting those companies.
Excellent, thanks, Ron. Actually, Joan, maybe you can expand on that, because you mentioned in your introductory remarks that you know, it's easier to get into the 10, 20 million, but after that, it's access to funding to grow as an organization becomes complex. So do you think?
Well, it's interesting that for us to get anywhere between 1 and 5 million actually is very easy in Canada. So at the very, very small stages. But once you have a certain amount of momentum going, I believe fundamentally that the venture capital people that are out there, or the people that are actually handling the money stream, I think there's a distinct lack of vision. And so if it's not bricks and mortar, or it's not natural resources, and it's high tech, there's a huge lack of understanding as to why this would be a really good business to invest in. As a result of which, there are an enormous number of private equity people from the US that are actually trolling Canadian cities. And I asked them as they came to us, because we distinctly wanted to stay Canadian, a couple of things. You know, we thought we could make a difference in the world, and we are. And it was this passion, as you mentioned, that do you think that you have a vision, that the company, the people have a vision that you can change the world? We wanted that to be here. And so we were approached by a lot of people from the US, and I said, why are you up here? And they said, because we can pick great companies up in Canada that nobody will fund. We take them away and turn them into huge successes. And so to your point about culture, we need to talk to the financial people here and say, look, we are losing our intellectual property. We're losing all of this intellect that our young people put into coming up with these great ideas. It's all going away. And I believe that that is the future of Canada. I mean, high-tech, creativity, innovation outside of the resource sector is where we're going to build jobs for the youngsters of today. That is what they want to do. I travel all over the world. I mean, I was with IBM for 10 years, so it was like listening to, you know, Home Week. But you know, when you go around the world, you realize that all around the world, the youngsters are engaged and connected. And they're engaged with technology, they're engaged with new ideas. And only a certain number of them want to go and work on an oil rig, or want to go and work in a mine. And so if we're not going to provide that environment for them, then we're going to lose them. And it's as simple as that.
Interesting, thanks. Thanks to see. So Warren, just talking about the whole environment and the emerging world that is happening, because I've heard you talk in the past, you mentioned that, you know, by 2020 that we'll see some dramatic change in the economy. And is there something that we should sit up and notice as it's happening on the emerging world, that innovation's taking place somewhere else that we should be looking at, whether it's in their mechanisms of financing, whether it's in technology adoption? What do you see things? How do you see them?
Well, I think that's a very important point, because I think there's a view that the traditional economies have the box on innovation and are going to be leaders. There's a number of issues. One, where the money is. And increasingly you're finding the big pools of cash in countries that we were not typically reliant on. We've recently seen Chinese investment in Western Canada and major oil concerns and gas concerns, and that was a rounding error in terms of their foreign exchange reserves. They've got $3.4 trillion. Russia, Brazil, much more active in that. So where the financing used to come from, traditionally the US or Europe, is going to change, and I think it's going to change pretty dramatically. And the second thing is that if you look at the education, the system, the focus on technical training and the like, my strong suspicion is we're going to see increasingly out of Asia and other places a real rush in innovative activity. And it will probably surprise us over the next 5 years or so in a wide variety of areas. I was giving a talk to a group last night, and one of the people mentioned, well, we should have been much more aggressive in solar in Ontario because that was part of the policy, and it was couched in terms of environmental remediation. The country with the biggest problems in terms of environmental remediation is China. They may well, because of necessity, lead in that particular space. It's not because they've picked that particular one in an academic sense. It's a social imperative, and it's a political imperative. So as we go over the next 5 years, if there's a thing that's going to take our breath away or catch us by surprise, it will be how much innovation and dynamic activity really begins to be driven in countries that we are very, very unfamiliar with now.
Interesting, thanks. So now I'll open it to the panel. If you've got any questions for each other, it's the time.
I just wanted to make a point on the workforce, because in our sector, there are thousands of jobs available without people to fill the jobs. And again, if you look in India, there's probably 15,000 today available. And really this comes down to the fundamental disconnect in the educational policy, in that within our schools, they don't want to teach the technological piece. They want to still teach in a very purist sense. So in our case, if it's a feature film or a television, teach people how to do art or whatever, but it's not enough, because today they really have to do both. You cannot do anything today without being technologically savvy. So one of the things I'm trying to push with the polytechniques and the universities is that they have to accept that now technology is a part of absolutely everything the youngsters are doing, and they're not job prepared if they don't do that. And that's something I think.
I just want to share that. That's a really super point relative to the ability to align the academic. And if you look at the challenges that the University of Waterloo, the Stratford campus had, which is trying to do just that in its master's program, bringing technology, business, and culture together in a very experiential learning environment. And programs like that are really brand recognized and allowing our students to come out and be able to be better adapted, where some of our traditional education has been, because we've needed it to be that way, maybe more linear in terms of the programs that you have. So I think that's a really key point around education.
I can reinforce that. As Google, we've grown substantially over the last year, and it's been quite hard to find resources and people with the skills we need in Canada. We've brought people internally, transferred them from other countries, or recruited even from other countries, as much as we've found people in Canada, especially at even more senior levels. It's very challenging.
And believe it or not, we're doing the same. We're having to bring people from other countries.
Yeah.
So that is a scary point. And I think that we need to make sure that we're vocal about the fact that we need this conversion within the education system.
Interesting.
So maybe a question for Joan.
Yeah.
The top 3 things you'd like to see done here in Canada to make investment capital available to smaller startup companies. What would those top 3 be?
Well, I think certainly to make investment available, what my experience was that if I went to 10 or 15 different investment possibilities, let's say the case or FIC or the bank, etc., that with the same proposal of a business plan, their analysis was uniformly different. So there isn't really a way for them to analyze if a business that they're not familiar with is actually going to be successful. I would certainly like to see some sort of a fund available to enable the companies, the incubator or the small to medium companies, really do that commercialization, that expansion. We're already in 123 countries. We can support in 23 languages. You know, we're award winning. It really is kind of silly that you'd have to become part of another company in order to go to the next stage. What is it that is the incentive? And to be quite frank with you, I was told, you know, below a certain amount is a no-brainer, and above. So our threshold is too low. I guess our threshold is too low in what the expectation is to invest in what is now a medium company.
So hold on to any other questions. Maybe I'd like to open it now to the floor if there are any questions from the audience in terms of the innovation agenda or the innovation economy. No? Okay, so maybe yeah, go ahead.
Can I ask
Sure.
a question? Because we do have some very name brand global accounts on, and we've heard the small company perspective. I would love to hear from, you know, Microsoft, and I think you touched a little bit on this, John, but Microsoft and Google's perspective. What is the role of those large companies to help spur and move the opportunities along for those small to medium companies?
So when I look at that, a little bit more alliteration, I started off with S's, I'll do P's, you know, people, place, and promotion, right? So I think one thing is people. You know, we're the power of the people. The Canadians are a passionate people and want to be able to create and drive that forward. So having that individual interaction, that advice and guidance, to be able to show mentors, to be able to show other perspectives around helping people use technology and move that forward. Place. You know, I'm a big fan of Richard, Florida. Canada's a very, very spiky country. When I'm in Halifax, there's a great deal of innovation happening there. I'm part of the Science Technology Advisory Council of Innovacor, and I get to see people coming forward with great ideas. I was in Moncton, St. John's, like you name it, we see innovation happening across. So Canada is very, very spiky. I talked to an entrepreneur in Moncton. He came from Toronto and previous from the US. He relocated in Moncton because he loves the city. He loves living in Canada. You know, think of this for a moment for yourself. Why do you live here? Right? You love the country, you love the safety, you love the healthcare, you love the education, you love the commutes. You know, those things attract people here. There was people bemoaning the fact that people want to come to Canada to start new lives. That's a great thing. Canada has great immigration policies to help new Canadians come in and be successful. ICTC has a coaching program to bring in new Canadians to do that mentoring, that matching. Let's harness that power. You know, we heard a lot about the policy side of the house. I see policy as a squishy bag. Let's not focus on one particular aspect, because typically what happens is you push down here, something pops out someplace else. Let's be consistent across the board to remove policy friction. When I talk to startups, it's policy friction that causes them heartaches. I can't do this, I need to compliance this, I need to do that. Let's remove that. Let's continue to make Canada an important place to bring people together. Right? We can do a lot of great distance learning stuff, we can do a lot of great distance conversations, but there's nothing like coming in on a Monday morning and have that chance collision. I was thinking, and then have a serendipitous conversation around that. And we see that at universities all the time. And the last piece is promotion. You know, I'm amazed at the pockets of innovation and creativity that are happening across the country. And we see some universities taking a lead at providing that promotion. You know, Waterloo was there at one point. So look at the digital media hub that's now for Ryerson, you know, and how they're now taking some of that spotlight. But we need to do that across the board. How many people have heard about the Center for Brain Repair that used to be in Halifax? They were curing diseases that we once thought were incurable by taking and growing cells, planting millions of them in your head to change the lives of people with Parkinson's and curing them essentially. And yet we don't know about these things. So perhaps it's a cultural thing that we as Canadians, you know, we play not to lose. No, we need to thump our chest. We need to own the podium for the next version of the economy. We need to put out that goal and promote the heck out of that so that that funding can come here. And we can be bold then to say, no, we're going to be that next world-leading company, and we're not going to wait for some of the companies around the table here to come and buy us.
Yeah, we talk internally at Google about being fairly humble, and I think Canadians overall are very humble, and I think we could all do a better job of identifying those pockets of innovation. And actually, you know, we've got a significant chunk of the technical leaders in Canada in this room, and I think we could all do a better job of identifying people that are doing good jobs and holding them up as heroes and representatives of you know, what we aspire to be like, and getting more people aware of that stuff that's going on. I mean, I look at just the big companies that I work with as clients. And on a global scale, I still don't see that those large entities have the global aspirations that they should. You know, I operate in the telco and the retail space. I look at someone like an Orange, a Vodafone, a T-Mobile, they're global companies. I look at Canadian telcos, no one's interested in going outside of Canada. I look at Canadian retailers, not a single retailer outside of Canada. There's no Tesco, there are international retailers in France and Germany and UK, all going to Asia. No one in Canada wants to think beyond their borders at a large company scale, and I don't understand that.
Okay. I'd like to open it to the floor now, so gentlemen.
Thank you, Namir. Thank you, Namir. I have a two-part question, and it really relates to a comment Mark Goldberg made at the introduction when he referred to the digital economy strategy from Industry Canada that we're all waiting for. And the first part of my question is, why are we waiting? And the second part of my question is, what is it exactly we're waiting for? Is it tax incentives, economic stimulus? Surely it can't be what direction the industry can take, because we can see many examples where the digital economy is already emerging all of its own. The strongest example, perhaps, is the games production in Toronto, Montreal, and Vancouver. Joe Natale yesterday showed us where the opportunities were in health. And I asked a question there on behalf of an entrepreneur who had an application. He couldn't get traction in Canada. The issue is not because there's anything wrong with the application. There's some issues in the medical community. Is Industry Canada going to address that? I don't think so. So my question for the panel is two parts. Why are we waiting, and what is it we're waiting for?
I'll jump in and say, here, what are we waiting for? Right, so we should not be waiting for anything. I think the second piece is we're all exceptionally busy. We've got our heads down. We're bringing our innovation to the marketplace. When we look up, what direction are we going? And who's going to help us? Right, and so that's what that own the podium style quest or vision helps out. And so when you look at the consultation, it says Canada will have a world-leading digital economy, and it goes on. That is important from an international perspective. I'm in competition with my counterparts around the world. And when I go back to headquarters and say, okay, John, you got $1. What are you going to spend your $1 on? I need some evidence to say, hey, you know, it's not just me saying, look what I found in Moncton or look what I saw here. Here's how that supports and this is going towards a vision. And then you can use that for that promotion side.
Excellent.
I think it's about acceleration. It's about positioning and enabling us to compete. You know, we saw in the digital economy papers, we can't wait for the government. So there is a key role on the private sector, and I'm glad you covered that. The government can enable us to compete, and other countries around the world are doing it faster, better. And I think that's where we look at there is a real opportunity for us to accelerate, take the phenomenal knowledge-based economy that we have in Canada, position it higher on the radar, you know, to really capitalize on it and encourage and promote the development of companies in Canada that allows us and really positions us. And the third thing is we're not really waiting for, but sometimes we are because we're too polite, is we need to be nationalists. We need to stand up there behind a BlackBerry and say, I am phenomenally proud, no pun intended on the panel, but we can do this some. You're really important too, but we have to be able to say, you know, I'm really important of our Canadian innovative technology, and this is really important to your kids. And when we do that, we're going to also, you know, create. So we are waiting for more consumers to stand up behind and be more, raise our nationalistic flag.
Excellent, thanks.
Well, if I could just, to the point that was raised earlier, why more Canadian small and medium companies don't go international. I think fundamentally there's a fear factor. And because of the fact that we built our business first in China, Taiwan, Korea, and the Philippines, and then moved to India, more recently Africa, we now have maybe 8 or 9 countries in Africa, the Caribbean, and South America. There actually is a roadmap. There is a methodology to a company going global. But, and I mean, I have spoken at Ted Rogers and McGill and other places. The problem is we need to capture that roadmap so that other companies can see and see that it's not impossible and it's not daunting. I think because we're next to the United States, people often think we'll just go south. Whereas we kind of took the approach, we're already king in LA, we got to go somewhere else. Let's go where nobody has been before. And by the way, about immigrants, we're all immigrants in our country, which is in our company. You know, I was born in England, raised in the Caribbean. Our chief operating officer is born in Hong Kong. Our chief technology officer is born in Mexico. Our Vice President of Marketing is from Israel. The one Canadian born is Francois, who of course is French-Canadian out of Montreal. So I think it's really that we need to make it visible that this is possible.
Interesting, thanks. Question from...
Maybe a bit of a doom and gloom side. I recently been involved in a lot of CRTC stuff, and one of the ideas that came to me was maybe this is like a gold rush, where in the reinvention of the economy, digital economy, people are going and staking their claims. And we've got Google that basically got the search engine claim and the mapping and well, a whole lot. You got Yahoo, Microsoft, Apple, and so on and so forth. And we still have smaller companies now that innovate and come out with new products. And recently I had a friend yesterday, he started off a new company in Toronto. Are we to the point now where all the low-hanging fruit has been taken on a global basis? Because when companies like Google go, they go global, they take over the world, so that we can't really expect a Canadian company to come out and compete against an established Google, can we? Or can we? And if it's just a low-hanging fruit that's left to innovate in, how much longer before this whole information revolution is stabilized and we just, you know, go like we had in the Industrial Revolution, where you just improve a little bit? Or to put it in a shorter way, when do we go from revolution, where innovation is very easy because you bring out new stuff, from revolution to just evolution?
I suppose I should answer that based on the number of times you mentioned Google. I think we're at the ultimate tip of the iceberg. We have so far to go when it comes to, I think it is a gold rush, but I think it hasn't even started yet. I think the technical changes we're going to see in the next decade are going to amaze us. You know, there are some big players in the market now that have, you know, won certain bits of certain things. But as I said earlier, we honestly believe we're tackling 1% of the world's problems. There are so many opportunities out there to leverage technology to really solve some big challenges and create big opportunities. And it doesn't even have to be big stuff. Our CEO mentioned the other day, he said, you know, as an example, think of the most basic thing you can think of. Think of a toaster. Why do we have toasters that still burn bread? Technology can solve that problem. Why has no one solved it? It's simple. Like, that's just one of billions of opportunities of things that are out there that technology can fix. So I think we're just on the cusp of it.
If you look at the other side of that as well, I think it's very important. We've been dealing in markets of, at best, hundreds of millions of people. You were talking about Africa. There's 1.1 billion people in Africa. If you took China and India out of Asia, there's 1.4 billion people left over in those countries. So it's not only being at the tip of the iceberg in terms of innovation and shifts in technology, the market itself is on the cusp of exploding in whole areas that we can't imagine. We need to understand the culture. We need to understand the various regulatory environments and the opportunities. But we are at the very doorstep of this. We have a very, very long way to go.
And I'd have to echo that. You know, we've been around for over 30 years, and we're reinventing ourselves yet again, right? And when you look at that whole landscape of where the computer companies were 30 years ago and how they move along, it continues to evolve. And so, you know, there are great opportunities around some of those things where you think there's an incumbent. You know, we wouldn't continue to invest in Bing if we didn't think there was an opportunity, right? So there's those types of things. I think on the other side, Canada is also looking towards the future. I had the privilege to go to the opening of the Mike and Ophelia Lazaridis Quantum Nano Center in Waterloo. And they want Waterloo to become the quantum nano valley, like the Silicon Valley. So that next wave of innovation, along with the Perimeter Institute and looking at the theoretical physics. And so coupled with, hey, we can do things better than the incumbents, and hey, we've got some fantastic new ideas about how we can grow this in the future, I think it puts Canada in a great position. We just need to be bold to get there.
Amir, these last two questions really, in my view, tie together, okay? The idea of low-hanging fruit really presupposes you're in a static situation, and you know, I think it's anything but static, and I think people have explained that quite well. And maybe that ties back a little bit to the whole question about the federal consultation on the digital economy, et cetera. We're 3 years further down the pipe from when all that was occurring. I would almost tell you, I think it's almost irrelevant in some ways, okay? They've already missed several things that have happened, okay, in the intervening 3 years. What's probably more important about the federal government is they make sure they don't do things that stifle further innovation and creativity, you know, and I think that's very important. You know, and I take a little shot here at the CRTC, okay, while I have the opportunity, okay. I don't think necessarily the customer code was such a great idea when you look at it, because it's presupposing what the customers out there want. And in this day and age, I think anybody who believes they can put a framework in place from a regulatory perspective, okay, that does that, I think you're making some guesses, okay, that not too many have been able to make in the past. But more broadly, you know, where the federal government, I think, needs to go, and provincial governments to a large extent as well, okay, is about enabling innovation, okay, into those sectors that they control. Education, health, you know, those are things that are controlled. They're in the public sector. They need to better enable innovation in those particular areas, okay? That's where I think, again, the federal government needs to go with their digital strategy in the future. But definitely, you know, the idea of low-hanging fruit, I very much disagree with that. It's too dynamic. It is what we think is low-hanging today. You know, in 6 months from now, none of us even guess what might be low-hanging in 6 months.
If I may ask a second.
Just quick, it has to be quick.
Just a quick
Yeah.
question. Would it be fair to say that one of the big differences, where in the US you had Garage Company that became Google, Apple, and so on and so forth, whereas in Canada we don't seem to have that sort of engine, would it be fair to say it's a lack of venture capital?
Well, I think we do have the engine in Canada, but that it doesn't get the watering to grow into the big tree. And so, you know, Google and Microsoft, they're very large companies, but there's lots of space for us alongside them to innovate and create. I think it's our own mindset in Canada. We need to get into the schools. We need to make entrepreneurship something attractive. If you speak to many students today, their great desire is to go into the public service. I mean, we are creating youngsters that are risk averse because they don't see necessarily that the excitement, you know, the sheer adrenaline rush of bringing something out that's great and taking it somewhere else, meeting interesting people all over the world. These are the things we've got to engage them with, because we're building a society where it seems more attractive to just kind of coast and go for the pension. And that's wrong. We have to really create an environment where people think it's interesting, entertaining, you know, really energizing to be entrepreneurs.
Excellent. Excellent. Any other questions from the floor? No. So we are coming to the end of our discussions. I may ask you just in one word, what is the solutions base, just to move it into that level? What do you think is the one thing, one liner that we have to do today to get the innovation economy happening in Canada? Chris, maybe we'll start with you.
I think dream big and inspire others to do the same.
Okay.
Promote ourselves and help and ensure we promote each other.
Okay.
More venture capital.
Excellent. Okay.
I'll focus on that last P, promotion. We need to thump our chests and show what we can do.
And I'm throwing my hat in with the youngsters, so I think that we just need to really engage with them and get them excited, because that's the future.
Similar to that answer, if I was looking at one thing to change, it would be something with respect to culture, and it is definitely our educational system that has to be revamped. And while you would think we always talk about the university level and the like, we've got to start at the very early age, because if we lose kids in the primary schools, we've lost them all the way through the process.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Well, I'd like to thank all the panel. I think from my perspective, you know, when I look at some of the ideas that came out today and the passion behind it, I think we're in very good hands in Canada. So thank you very much. It's certainly been exciting discussion, and I would, you know, look forward to maybe taking the debate further in the next number of years. Thank you.
Boy, Namir, you cut 2 minutes off. I had to run up here with my legs in this stage. Tracy, I gotta say, it takes a lot of guts to be sitting next to the guy from Google with an Android system, and near John with with Microsoft Mobile or Windows 8 and say, you know, we got to support BlackBerry. So I handed to Trace. I do use a BlackBerry, but that's only because the other guys haven't sent me a free phone to try out recently.
I do support Google every day, and I also support Microsoft.
There we go. Anyway, folks, terrific stuff. I was tweeting a bunch of the thoughts. John loved the comment that it's not a digital economy; it's a reimagining the current economy, and really appreciate the insights that the whole panel has provided, and I think we really do need to take a transcript of this and send it to the folks at Industry Canada, and who I know would love to issue a digital economy paper if we can only get a minister to sign off on it. Folks, we are about to head off to a coffee break, actually a really wonderful coffee break, looking at the items that are there, sponsored by We Do Technologies. We'll be back in 30 minutes with our CIO-CTO panel. And again, thanks very much to our digital economy, or sorry, the innovation agenda panel for your participation today. Thank you.